Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Savannah Heron-Q if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Monday, April the 4th, and today I'm joined by what might be a familiar face if you've been tuning in for the past week or so, and this is our reporter, Paul Gattis. Now, Paul covers North Alabama and especially politics across the state. Now, today we are talking about politics, and that's why I've got Paul back to join us. What we're talking about is a story that Paul wrote over the weekend about leading U.S. Senate candidate Mike Durant and his kind of change as approaching the results of the 2020 election. His now statement is, and I'll quote here from an interview that Mike Durant did on March 25th with the Capitol Journal, and he said, "quote The bottom line is, I don't think Joe Biden won the election." End quote. The reason we're talking about that today, and the reason why Paul wrote about that this weekend, is because that is different than the answers, or at least it is different by the lack of omission that Mike Durant gave in January when asked similar questions. Paul, thank you for joining us today. I know that's a really brief intro about your reporting that we're going to leave here again in the comments for people, but give us a little bit of where we were versus where we are.
So, Mike Durant, in particular in the context of this story, he gave two speeches like within days of each other in Huntsville. One was to the Republican Men's Club, and that was a speech that I covered. A few days later, he spoke to the Republican Women of Huntsville. I did not.
And these were in January as well.
These were in January, yes. Okay. And I did not cover that speech, but I saw video of that speech. And in the first speech to the Republican Men's Club, which is one of the most prominent Republican clubs in Huntsville. I mean, there was probably 250, 300 people in the audience. That is a must stop that Republican candidates make on their campaigns. So Durant spoke for about 19 minutes, and he never mentioned Trump. Never mentioned Trump's name. He never delved into the 2020 election. He spent a lot of it talking about his background, primarily with his career as an Army aviator, and of course his story is that was turned into the movie Black Hawk Down. And then with the Republican Women of Huntsville a few days later, he made a shorter speech, and then he took questions from the audience. And somebody in the audience asked him just straight up, do you think Trump won the election in 2020? And his reaction was it was kind of humorous. He kind of had a big smile, and it was kind of like, oh boy, how am I going to answer this? And he jokingly looked at his watch. It's like, oh look, we're out of time. But he went ahead and answered the question. And basically his answer was like, there's no way to know. There's just no way to know. There's no way to speculate. Durant said, I wish Trump had won. I voted for Trump. But as far as the outcome, we just don't know.
And I'll interrupt you, Paul, just say I've got your reporting in front of me so I can give that quote. I know you don't have it in front of you, but he said Mike Durant said after he looked and kind of joked and said, we're out of time. And this was on January the 19th. He said, quote, what is the ground truth? No one will ever know. It's gone by. I can't speculate, if all the votes were absolute legitimate, what the outcome would have been. That was a quote from Mike Durant at that January 19th meeting of the Republican Women of Huntsville. So I just wanted to throw in that quote, but go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and so then you fast forward to, I think it was March 25th. It was towards the end of March. Durant gave an interview to Todd Stacy on Capitol Journal. And that, of course, that video was, it was streamed live on YouTube. You can go and watch it right now. And he was asked about the 2020 election, and he said that the nation was robbed. That was the word he used, robbed, of a second Trump term. And Stacey went back to ask him, so, well, okay, can you kind of, what are you basing this on? What's your foundation here? And and Durant said, well, he went back to the fact that a lot of the voting laws were changed in 2020, and that made it more susceptible to fraud, to this or that, to basically uh, affect the election in a way that hasn't been available in the past to do. And for that reason, um, he thought Trump was denied the victory. He also cited the media's coverage of Hunter Biden, and that is a whole another can of worms that is probably too difficult to get into right this second. But suffice to say, if you've been following this, you're familiar with the with the allegations concerning Hunter Biden. Uh, and so, because Durant said that story was buried, which he considered to make President Biden a more appealing candidate. And so you add all that together, and Biden won when he shouldn't have. And so I asked for
Which was
clarification. Yeah.
interesting of Mike Durant to add that in there, because that was not a part of his first claim. Again, I've got you're reporting in those quotes in front of me. That's not part of the first claim about the changes in the process. An earlier claim about if the votes were absolutely legitimate, and then you go into this laptop issue, which is not directly related to votes. He says that this is related in the sense that media did not cover this as much as he thinks it should have been, and that would have influenced voter opinions. And voter opinions are different than actual votes. So I thought that was interesting, just a different kind of take on it there. Now, I wanted to look with a few of these questions and get to a few of these quotes again, because I think they're just so interesting. But you mentioned that this interview with the Capital Journal was on March the 25th. That was, let's say, a week and a half ago. So that compared to those January statements, about 2.5 months between those. I think that's fair to say. So what do we know that has changed within those 2.5 months, between the end of January to the end of March, to make Mike Durant come out more emphatically and make these claims? Again, he said in January, what's the truth? Nobody knows. He goes on this show at the end of March and says, quote, my opinion on this is clear. I believe that Joe Biden was not rightfully elected, and the American people were robbed of 4 more years under President Trump because of unconstitutional changes to the process. That is what Mike Durant actually said on Friday in a statement to AL.com. So let's say Friday, April 1st, versus the January comments of, oh, I'm not sure, I can't speculate. What happened there?
Well, now as far as what caused Durant to change his position, um, we can't definitively say. What we can definitively say is in January, uh, Trump had endorsed Mo Brooks, who was also running for the Senate. So Trump's endorsement was not in play. It was just a non-issue. Then you fast forward to uh, towards the middle of March. Trump suddenly grows disenchanted with Brooks, and he announces he is withdrawing his endorsement. And so now all of a sudden, Trump's endorsement is available. Now, Trump's endorsement to voters is worth as much or as little as you want to make it to be. But in Republican circles, a Trump endorsement is considered more valuable than a non-Trump endorsement. 2 days before Trump withdrew his support of Brooks, Durant met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and he told Todd Stacey on the Capitol Journal, he said, "Yes, I was trying to get his endorsement." So the sudden change to voter integrity being top of his priority list if he's elected to Senate, as opposed to where it was in January, to where it was really a non-issue. It would seem that all signs would point towards trying to get Trump's endorsement.
Well, and we know, Paul, that the endorsement kind of falling out between former President Trump and Mo Brooks really a lot of that centers on Mo Brooks saying, look, there's nothing we can do about the 2020 election. Mo Brooks has been very emphatic about that,
Mhm.
especially in the days since he has lost that endorsement. Mo Brooks has come out and said publicly, he has said to both of us, Paul, there's nothing you can do there. If you think that it was stolen, there is no legal remedy to fix that. He says that January 6, 2021 was the end all be all. You got to move on. And that is what Mo Brooks has said, which we know has angered former President Trump. So, just an interesting fact in there to add, as you say, that Mike Durant says he went to Mar-a-Lago seeking that endorsement, or at least in hopes of that endorsement. That's just something else to add into there. So, another thing that I want to talk with you about, Paul, is this issue of voting integrity. Now, on March the 25th, when Mike Durant spoke with Capital Journal, he said that when asked by Todd Stacey, he said that voting integrity was his first priority. Now,
Mhm.
let's back up and rewind into January. Mike Durant didn't mention voter integrity. That was
Right.
not in his speeches. Again, you said it was about a 19-minute speech, and that was not mentioned. The name Trump was not mentioned. So we've gone from this not even being a talking point in the stump speech to now being number one priority. That's a pretty big change as well.
And you've just defined Republican politics in 2022. It's all about where do you stand on the 2020 election, uh, and of course, in every story, reporters all over the country will report about this, but they will always add the line something like, there's been no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would alter the outcome of the 2020 election. And there hasn't been any widespread evidence. And I will say, if there is evidence, um, uh, let me know. I would love to know that. I would love to have that. Any reporter would. Uh, but that is just kind of the litmus test of how you are defined within the Republican Party. And as far as what happened in 2020, whether something did happen, whether something didn't happen, uh, the reality for Republicans is even if something happens, even if they have the smoking gun, they can't do anything about it right now because the Democrats control the House, the Democrats control the Senate, and I think that is what Brooks and Durant before this. I think that's what they were referring to. Republicans need to retake the House, they need to retake the Senate, and maybe at that point they can make some legislative changes to whatever they think happened in 2020. But right now, it's just a tree falling in an empty forest. It just doesn't really matter until they get control back of the Congress.
And that was kind of Mo Brooks's point. Mo Brooks has said multiple times, look, what needs to be focused on right now is winning the next elections. We
Mhm.
don't need to go back and complain about an election that did not go our way. We need to focus on the next one. So that has kind of been Mo Brooks's talking points for a while now. And again, we know that Trump was not happy with those talking points. So then we go into again Mike Durant and his newfound talking points of voter integrity. Now, I want to reiterate something you said, which we should have probably mentioned earlier, but there has been no proof of widespread voter
Mhm.
fraud across the country. That's something to keep in mind here. Now, again, I want to go back to some of Mike Durant's comments. And this I thought was interesting when he talked about voter integrity and what he said was the problem with 2020. Mike Durant mentioned multiple problems. He mentioned, again, Hunter Biden's laptop issue, as you went over a second ago. He said, and again, I'm looking at your reporting here, he said the rules that were changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic,
Mhm.
due to voter mail-in ballots, we should say. Now, none of his explanations, though, as to what Mike Durant believes went wrong in 2020 actually accounted for saying that President Biden improperly received votes or that Trump was improperly discounted votes. He didn't necessarily say that. He said there were other issues with the process that caused the election drama. Is that true?
Well, and that is something that a lot of people have talked about is they point to these changes and they point to the process, but that does not necessarily explain how Biden should have gotten less votes and how Trump should have gotten more votes. Um, and the thing about it is, a lot of these places that we're talking about this, it was Republican legislatures that approved it in the first place. Pennsylvania is a popular state for people to point to. Well, the Republican legislature in Pennsylvania approved these voter changes actually before COVID came along. Now those, I think it's the maybe the mail-in ballots or um, some of the changes. I can't remember exactly which ones, but have been struck down by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Um, the Republican, I mean, the voting deadline was extended in Pennsylvania to allow mail-in votes to come in after voting day, but that was done in September of 2020. It wasn't like these were some changes that were made after the election. Um, and even if there was something nefarious going on, though, it still doesn't explain why Trump should have gotten more votes and Biden should have gotten less votes.
Well, and again, Mike Durant never said Biden got votes that were supposed to be
Mm.
cast for Trump. He did not say that. He did not make claims about boxes being brought in and run through machines. He didn't make any of those claims, which again, we know that there's no evidence of any of that happening. But he did not make those claims. He centered his claims around media coverage and centered his claims around the process that which these ballots were cast. So an interesting kind of spin there that, again, Mike Durant is now taking with this voter integrity being his number one issue, which he wasn't mentioning several weeks ago. Now, again, we know that now Mike Durant is the leading Senate candidate right now in this race. Polls, some put him very close with Katie Britt, some put him a little bit more ahead. But again, they are the two leading candidates. As of now, Mike Durant is the leading candidate. So, Paul, do we think that this is the Mike Durant we're going to see from now until that primary on May 24th?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I wouldn't expect uh, any kind of position change on voter integrity. Um, but we talk about it's a month and a half to the election, to the primary, and that's a long time. There are a lot of things can change between now and then. Um, Both Durant and Katie Britt, in particular, have a lot of money to spend on advertising. Mo Brooks is trailing in the polls, and he's trailing in fundraising. But Brooks announced today that he has released a statewide TV ad, so you're going to be seeing more of him during commercial breaks. Uh, and don't forget, while Durant has been leading two recent independent polls, he is nowhere near the 50% threshold to win the primary outright. So that would there's every indication that this is going to go into a runoff, which is I think is June 21st. If I without looking at my notes, but I think it's June 21st. So now you're looking even further down the road. There's a lot of time for a lot of things to happen.
I think that that's a good point to make, Paul. Sometimes we look and we say, oh, a month and a half away. In real life, that is no time at all, right? We will blink and it will be here. But in the world of politics, you have plenty of time to do all kinds of things in the next month and a half. Now, Paul, I do want to ask you as well before we go, have you gotten any type of response from the Durant campaign of saying why this change and letting them explain why now voter integrity is the number one issue versus several months ago?
Just the statement that we had in our story on Saturday, and um, we are working to get more information, trying to get a better understanding, and that's the thing I think people needs to understand about this process. As reporters covering this, we want to have the best understanding we can. I mean, if there is some explanation, if there is some reason, if there is some uh, you know explanation for why this change has occurred, we want to know about that. Uh, and we want to give the fullest picture we can to readers, and because readers are voters, and we want everybody to be as informed as possible.
Absolutely, that's a good point you make, Paul. Now, I want to close out with reading one quote that I think was very interesting from again that March 25th interview from Mike Durant. He says, "quote I can tell you, I wish he had won, meaning Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I think we would be in a lot better shape than we are right now. I voted for him both times. I think that most people today who didn't vote for him probably regret the fact that they did not. It's impossible to speculate on whether he did or didn't win with legitimate votes, but if he we." but we all wish he did, no question about it, end
Right.
quote. So I think that's an interesting quote there from Mike Durant. So I know that people will feel very strongly one way or another if they agree with him or not. And I guess that we will find out ultimately if people agree on May 24th, on the primary day. So Paul, thank you so much for your coverage here. I know you're going to keep on this story, keep on our just politics coverage just through now. I was going to say through May 24th, but after that as well. So,
Right.
Paul, thank you so much. We're going to link that story here again for people to read. If there's anything about this race that you specifically want us to cover, if you want Paul to cover, please send us an email, leave it in the comments here, and we will make sure that we get on it. So, Paul, thank you. Everybody watching, thank you. Have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.